Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is from the incredible mind of John Holliday over on Reddit No Sleep. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. Entitled, Don't Whistle at Night. Let's get straight into that. Someone or something has been stalking me and my family for weeks now. Whoever it is, they already have a body count and I'm terrified me or my wife are next. I'm hoping someone here has some idea as to what this is or has any idea of what to do, because I'm pretty much out of ideas. Not to be over dramatic, but it all started with a dog. Daisy and I had recently relocated to suburban Arizona from Boston, bringing our 2-year-old wire hair pointer named Bucky with us. Buck was always a reserved dog, even in the bustling hub of chaos that is Boston, Massachusetts. He rarely barked or growled, and most of his time was spent curled up on the couch with me during my late nights, watching crappy horror TV and waiting impatiently for Daisy's return. My wife is a police officer, often working late into the night, or is nestled at the foot of our bed as we all slept. Buck was a good boy. One of his most outstanding features, however, was how his human eyes looked. Not in a way that was uncomfortable or disconcerting, but more so in a way that was almost soothing, like he'd seen a thing or two, and that everything would be all right. Buck originally settled in well, along with my wife and I. Our first few weeks passed without incident, and Daisy starting her shifts with the local police department, and myself in my new high school teaching position. Me and Buck eventually fell into a routine after I finished up at the school for the day of taking a long walk through the mountains near our house. And that's really where this nightmare began. There was an exceptionally sunny day back in May that I decided that my dog and I were going to take a longer walk than usual. And Daisy would be working until 4 in the morning, and we both could use a little more exercise. We started out at the path we always did, leading up into the mountain range, but as I reached a familiar fork in the trail, I decided to take the road less travelled, and Buck didn't seem as keen on the idea. He stopped at the fork, looking at me, and then in the direction we normally walked, his human eyes carrying an emotion I'd never seen in them before. Fear. "Let's go, dude," I called to him from further up the new path. "Might be a little bit harder, but your mum thinks we're both getting a little bit chubby." And our cushy new digs. Begrudgingly, Buck followed me up the path. He eventually seemed to relax a little, but contrary to his normal behaviour of running ahead, he never once left my side. We walked uphill for about an hour in silence, passing rocks and trees and listening to the sounds of nature. It was steep, but not overly so, and I was glad I picked up the longer trail as I felt the stiffness of my day of teaching fade away. Eventually, we came to a small clearing overlooking the town, which seemed like a good place as any to take a breather. I whistled as I watched the golden rays of sun set and bathe my new home in its warm early evening glow. "Would you look at that?" I said quietly as I slowly sat down on a rock, commenting internally on how my knees and back weren't 18 anymore. I took a long, hard pull from my camelback and turned to pour some out for my dog, but Buck sat still and silent as the grave next to me. Looking out over the same buildings and neighbourhoods as I did, but I got the sense he wasn't absorbing its beauty so much as he was waiting for what I didn't know. "Hey, mister!" A child's voice startled me out of my trance. "Mister!" I looked around to see where the voice had come from. I couldn't quite tell if the voice was male or female, and my brain had some trouble processing that fact. It sounded almost like an echo, but without the repetition. "Mister, can I pet your dog?" The last word held no emphasis, monotone, and was what sounded almost like a whole octave lower in pitch. And that was when Buck started to growl. "Easy, bud." I patted his head in false comfort, trying to mask my own rising anxiety. One look at my dog and I knew I was fooling no one. I suppose there was no valid reason a child couldn't be up here with me, but still, it felt out of place to hear it alone on a mountain in the setting sun. I saw no source in any direction, not hiding behind trees or boulders, higher or lower in elevation. There was no one in view. "Hello?" I called out in response, hoping I could see where this mystery child was when they spoke next. However, I never heard anything other than Buck's growl. He was getting louder and suddenly let out an aggressive bark looking up the mountain. He barked several more times, still looking higher up the mountain. Not the path, but the mountain itself. After a few minutes of this, and me nervously looking around, I decided I wasn't really interested in hanging around. "Let's go, Buck," I whispered. Bucky immediately stopped barking and looked at me. Now, I studied this with a little more force. We started moving back down the mountain. Not too fast, but suddenly faster than we had climbed. I started hearing noises behind us as well, crunching and what sounded like wind. I could have sworn I heard the child's voice at one point as well, but I thought it may have been a bird, as I couldn't make out what was said, if anything. About halfway back to my car, Buck suddenly stopped. I turned back to see him growling up the mountain again, the same way he'd been before we started our descent. "Bucky, come on," I commanded through clenched teeth. He ignored me. He had never ignored me in his life, not even when he was a puppy. His head was fixed to the path we had just walked down. He suddenly stopped growling, and I noticed everything was completely silent. Out of the blue, Bucky took off in the direction we had come from, heading back up the mountain and barking all the way. "Buck!" I yelled, the fear I felt coming through in my voice. I started running after him, but Buck turned, running off the snaking trail and directly up the mountain. He bounded between trees and rocks, moving faster than I ever could have hoped to in that terrain, until he was finally out of sight. I could still hear his barking, though, when I followed the sound. I followed his bark for what seemed like hours, but I'm sure it was just a few minutes, until the barking was replaced by a shrill yelp. "Buck!" I cried out to my beloved pet and pushed myself faster. My heart was pounding and sweat was pouring down my back in the warm Arizona air. But I still felt a distinct shiver. As I crested a final hill, climbing over a large pile of stones, I caught up. It took me a few moments to really comprehend what I had actually caught up to. There was a small plateau, and on it lay the remnants of my best friend. Buck lay on the ground, suddenly and undeniably dead. His body was filleted. His skeleton remained intact, but the flesh had been peeled off the bone. His innards seeped into the ground through his ribcage, and his once so human eyes were now cold and grey. I dropped to my knees. "What the... Oh, God!" I tried to keep from choking up and failed. One tear turned into a deluge. "Hey, mister!" A new voice arose from just behind the next clumping of boulders. This voice, however, it was deep, more like that of an adult male. Even so, there was something somehow off about it. "Can I pet your dog?" the new voice asked. I felt an absurd rush of adrenaline as I quickly contemplated my options. I searched for the reason why this new voice sounded wrong to me as I did that. It sounded like an adult man, but it was a faint inflection, like there was a much quieter voice speaking in unison with the booming baritone. My fight or flight suddenly was weighted heavily to the latter, and I turned and left my dog lying there on the mountain alone. I made it back to the path in record time and sprinted the remaining distance down the path. Even so, it was a long run, and I heard the voice behind me the whole way. "Pet your dog! Pet your dog! Pet your..." I felt my lunch rising in my throat as the wind whipped my tears away from my face. I was gasping for air, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not at all too soon, I saw my shitty little Camry in the distance, and I picked up the pace. The voice was bouncing from the right to left and back again behind me. "Hey, mister, can I come with you?" This new question terrified me, but I didn't fully process it through the shock I'd already felt. "Get to the car," I commanded myself through clenched teeth. I threw myself into the driver's seat and shoved the key into ignition. And as my engine turned over, I had the distinct fear in my gut that it wouldn't start. But of course, it did. My foot was to the floor already as I shifted into drive, and as I all but peeled out of the dirt parking lot, I looked in a rearview mirror and saw nothing. On the drive home, I cried. The adrenaline had leaked out of my body and I was suddenly feeling everything I'd experienced in the last few hours. I mourned my dog. I wondered pointlessly if there was anything I could have done, if I should have brought what was left of him with me, if any of this would have happened if I just stuck to the original path we always took. After a little time had passed, I called 911 and told them what had happened. They assured me they would send someone to the mountain to look around for whoever or whatever had killed Buck, and they'd get back to me. I didn't hold my breath. I thought on what happened, the voices and the brutal slaying of my pet. It had to be a few people, probably all kinds of fucked up on bath salts or meth or something. Some bullshit redneck family that wanted to scare the city boy and probably eat my fucking dog. That was the only reasonable explanation. My phone rang and rang in my cup holder, but I ignored it all the way home. And my tears were all dried up by the time I parked in my driveway. There was a cruiser in the driveway and the living room light peeked through the curtains on her front window. Of course my wife had heard. As soon as the call went out on the net, she would have heard. She had probably been the one calling me. Most likely had been waiting here for the best part of 45 minutes. Then it took me to drive back to my house from the mountain. As I walked in the door, Daisy threw her arms around my neck and I gently wrapped mine around her waist. She didn't look like she'd been crying, although she looked incredibly concerned. I wondered how I looked. "What happened, John? Are you okay? Where's Buck? The dispatcher said you called in that he was dead. Where is he?" She bombarded me with questions, and as I guided her back into the living room and onto the couch, I tried my best to answer them. I told her the whole story I have told you, and in doing so, I was racked with emotion all over again. I managed to hold back any tears, but the fear I recalled alone encouraged them to flow freely. Daisy was quiet and listened, her hand resting on my arm. When I was finished, I realized how incredibly tired I was. I'd experienced this before, in my time in the military, and after a particularly stressful evening, one filled with adrenaline, either in combat or in the garrison. After the stress had passed, Marines would all but pass out. I knew that was what was happening to me. I was crashing. Daisy asked if I would be all right while she went back to work, and I said I would. She kissed my head and hugged me again. "I love you," she told me as she made her way out to the cruiser. I heard it begin to rumble and watched the taillights fade into the distance through the windows. My shower is usually spotty at best, sputtering and never quite warm enough, but luckily today, when I needed it most, it was warm, constant, and inviting. I tried to let the day wash off of me, imagining all the worries and strange voices and dead pets floating away into the drain, but it all stayed, of course. It was all real. "Can I come with you?" The last phrase uttered by the voice replayed in my head. Had this sick bastard wanting to get into my car? Had he gotten into my car? I suddenly had an irrational fear that there was a man covered in blood of my dog hiding in the darkened back seat of my Toyota, smiling at the ceiling, waiting for me to go to sleep or to get back in my vehicle. The image shook me so bad and deeply, I actually grabbed my handgun from the safe and looked, flashing my lights in every tiny nook and cranny of my car. Nothing. I knew that would be what I found, but I had to look anyways. Finally, after looking through my entire house now, I sank into my sheets. Every door was locked, every window closed firmly. My weapon rested on the table beside me, and as I flipped out the light, I whistled to myself, almost without thought, and slowly laid myself down under my covers. I was finally able to relax and let the crash take me into a deep sleep. I was on that precipice of slumber when I heard something that slammed me back into consciousness. "Hey, mister." It was faint, coming from outside. I snatched up my pistol and jumped to the window. I saw nothing but heard a faint rustling, and then, "Mister, can you?" And there was a pause, and I gripped my weapon tighter. "Open!" The voice boomed, as if a mix of both child and adult, and something almost animalistic. And as it did, a dark shadow dropped down from the top of my window and slammed against the glass. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. The neighbors called it in. They burst through my door with the wife leading the charge and found me sitting on my bed, shaking and holding my empty 9mm. You wouldn't have been able to count from the shattered glass in front of me, but there were 17 empty shell casings on the ground surrounding the bed. They took my statement and then repeatedly asked my wife if I was prone to outbursts like this, or if I had any history of post-traumatic stress, blackouts, to which she confidently told them no. But after the rest of the officers left, she looked at me with concern. "Are you sure what you saw, honey?" she asked gently, from a noticeable distance as well. I had returned my weapon to its safe, a condition of me being allowed to keep it. I suspected my wife pulled some strings. "Of course I am," I whispered. She remained silent for a few moments, and then she said, "It could have just been an owl or a bat or something." I said nothing. It hurt knowing she doubted me, but who wouldn't? What I had seen didn't seem to be believable. The face that had slammed into my bedroom window was Bucks, my dog, followed by one I cannot describe accurately. I was human, or it was humanesque. I was only there for a flash, and it had all the shapes, but at least in terms of its head. The darkness obscured its features, and in a moment I had raised my weapon and begun firing. The enormous shape jumped off my house and moved within human speed, while still carrying the head of my murdered pet off into the night, chased by the echo of gunfire. This is far from the end of the story, but I need to go. I've been waiting on my visitor all night, and I think he's finally come to call. I'll update as soon as I can, if he doesn't make it inside again. Please, if anyone has any ideas, let me know. Daisy and I, along with the people we've gone to for help, are in the dark. Wish me luck. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Sounds like the start to an epic series here by the incredible mind of John Holliday over on Reddit No Sleep. Big thank you, John. Enjoyed this immensely, and I really do hope you enjoy my rendition. And certainly do keep me updated if you have any more updates or further work in the future that you'd like me to narrate. Guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things, like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the brand new contact email as on screen, which is contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend with friends and family and enjoying the beautiful summer weather. Looking forward to getting stuck in and taking a fight back to life, reaching for greatness and settling for nothing less. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.